It's CPAC Now time, America Uncanceled. I'm Mercedes Schlapp, joined by Matt Schlapp, of course. It's Tuesday again, Matt, and we've got some real breaking news happening tonight.
Yeah, so many of you know we started this new center to protect voters and their voices. Initially, it was just to protect voters, and then we realized that you can vote the way you want to vote and you can elect the officials you want in office, but yet now we have this new devilish interaction of CEOs and corporate entities somehow pressuring Republicans to simply not do what they said they would do, specifically on the issue of voter ID, but also on the question of protecting girls' sports. And we wrote a letter to the CEO of Delta Airlines, who is the only person not to respond. If you have anything to do with Delta Airlines, please send them a message that they should actually respond to a group that's working with half the country. We sent a letter to Major League Baseball. We sent a letter to the NCAA, and we have just gotten a response from the NCAA, which we will be posting on our website and on social media, so you can all read what their response is. And Dan Schneider, he got a title, so I clinched it with Dan Schneider, our executive vice president, and basically runs ACU, is with us. Dan, tell us what this response means from the NCAA, and everybody's going to be able to click the link to be able to read it for themselves.
Well, you can tell the NCAA has good lawyers, because their response is what we in Washington would call a non-response response. I found three really interesting things about this letter, but maybe the overarching thing that I should mention is that the commissioner of Major League Baseball met with you and me, and that was a very productive conversation. You know, it was gratifying that he took our concerns seriously, and I think everybody found that a valuable discussion. The president of the NCAA, of course, has merely sent a letter where he pretends to be responding to us, but he does not.
If I can, Dan, in the actual letter itself, they bring up two interesting points, which I'd like to get your response to. First of all, they say that NCAA believes inclusion and fairness can coexist for all student athletes, including transgender athletes at all levels of sport. And then they said that they believe that all student athletes will be treated with dignity and respect. Now, I know in one of our letters, when we sent the first letter out, there was a big really, you brought up this interesting point about science, right? How can we coexist in the sense of these biological males playing in the women's sports, in the girls' sports, basically negating all the progress that we've made in women's sports?
Right. Well, the NCAA has a good reputation in America because people think of the Final Four, the basketball tournament, football, but the NCAA is really just a gigantic corporation, tens of billions of dollars in revenues every year, and it works to keep that money. Now, of course, we are for private enterprise, but the NCAA is essentially a club of government agencies, right? The University of Kansas, my alma mater, is a government school. So the NCAA is essentially comprised of government entities, and it's never right for government to discriminate against people. For the NCAA to discriminate against women is completely wrong. It's also illegal under Title IX of the U.S. Code. But the NCAA claims to be seeking fairness and equality. Yet in this letter, it claims that it's trying to pursue equality. Nobody has ever denied that transgender athletes should be allowed to compete. Of course, if you're a transgender athlete, you should be allowed to compete. That's not the question. It's who they compete against. And frankly, the NCAA has taken the cheap way out. They've forced women to be the easy target, the convenient way for the NCAA to ignore its burden of providing a fair opportunity for transgender athletes.
And they slurred us.
Women again have been discriminated against.
I think it's a slur against us. You know, the American Conservative Union sent that letter. It's on behalf of millions of Americans, including those who participate in girls' sports. And the implication is that if you're against the transgender athlete from competing in girls' sports, or the biological male from competing in girls' sports, somehow you're the bigot. That's kind of what this letter says to me.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. At the beginning, and Mercy, I'll get to your question about the science in a moment. But this letter begins with with Mark Emmert of the NCAA saying that he understands that there are different points of view on this. Well, if he understands that there are different points of view, why is he extorting states like South Dakota and North Dakota that if they pass these bills to protect women's sports, that there will never be another NCAA competition in those states? You know, he's in the letter to us, he says he understands there are differences of opinion, but he does not allow differences of opinion in sporting programs.
Well, the differences of opinion is that they're willing to threaten with economic harm, as we mentioned in our letter to them. The fact is that they're willing to pull out these tournaments from these states, basically saying it's my way or the highway. So to your point, there is no differing views. But in the letter, you talked about the scientific research being clear. Right. Testosterone suppression does not change the male body to recalibrate to the standards of the ability and the abilities of the female bodies. So it just shows that they have the transgender athletes have a competitive advantage against biological women.
Right. Now, of course, that is common sense. If there's somebody who's a 6'5" and weighs 300 pounds and decides to go through gender reassignment surgery or something, or mere testosterone treatment, that person remains 600 or 6'5". You know, the person does not shrink; their body mass stays large. That's common sense. But the U.S. government has studied this. The U.S. military has studied this, done scientific research. Even after 2 years of testosterone suppression, the differences, the physical advantages of a male body compared to a female body are still huge. That we would expect that, but the science shows this. You know, I think maybe our biggest concern is not merely whether women will be denied opportunities to compete. Of course, they should not be denied opportunities to compete. But we're also talking about serious physical injury and possibly life-threatening injuries for women who are competing against biological men who are so much larger. I think I may have mentioned before, we have an intern who is a great hockey player, a woman who is on a nationally ranked hockey team. She could find herself competing against men or transgender women who are literally twice her size. That would be dangerous for her. It's bad enough that her opportunity would be diminished, but her life could be put in jeopardy.
That's right. And Dan, once again, we're not saying that they shouldn't find an accommodation for transgender athletes. What we're simply saying is destroying girls' sports or women's sports does not accomplish the goal of inclusion in society. That actually harms a significant chunk of society. I know at the American Conservative Union, we don't necessarily have all the answers, but we know the answer is not to destroy girls and women's sports.
Right. The old adage, follow the money. The NCAA is choosing the cheap way out. They're putting the burden entirely on women because they don't want to risk their revenue stream. It's this multi-billion-dollar corporation. Right. They want to protect every penny it gets. That's why there's a Supreme Court case pending right now about NCAA's abusive monopolistic behavior toward athletes. They want to protect their revenue at all costs. And right now, they're putting the cost of finding a solution for transgender athletes entirely on female athletes.
Okay, so Dan, we're going to keep pushing at the American Conservative Union. We're going to push against these corporate entities that are destroying societal norms like girls' sports, like ID and voter verification. We're going to push Delta Airlines. Those of you watching the show, please help us. We're going to send a response to the NCAA. Half the country deserves a sit down with the NCAA to talk about the destructive nature of blackmailing governors in small states to try to force them to not sign legislation that would help protect girls' sports. And we're going to be taking this fight to every corporation that crosses the line, bridges this idea that they're neutral on some of these political questions. And I think we've already had a big effect.
Yeah, Matt Mercy, just one last thing. Make sure the audience knows that to see our original letter to the NCAA's response, and our reply to the NCAA, go to conservative.org. That's where people can find these original letters and help us in this fight.
That's right.
Yeah, and I'll also put it out on my Twitter feed tonight so you can get to these original documents. And obviously, we need your voice in this fight. And we're going to be right back. with more CPAC Now after this short break. We're joined now by David Savavian, who's the director of the Pat Nolan Center for Criminal Justice Reform. David's been traveling around the country, and he wants to give all of us an update of really some great victories we've had out there in the States. David, thanks for joining us on CPAC Now.
Thank you for having me. The Nolan Center is the educational arm of the American Conservative Union Foundation. We have been working hard in red states on conservative criminal justice reform. And it's different than a lot of what we hear from the woke crowd. We are about public safety. We're about government accountability. We're about human dignity. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen strong wins in red states like Tennessee with Governor Lee and Mississippi with Governor Reeve. It's been a remarkable couple of weeks for us.
So could go through what just happened in Mississippi.
So in Mississippi, they have a really serious prison problem. It's overcrowded. The conditions are beyond belief. People go weeks, months without showers. There's horrible conditions in the prisons. And they've got a system where even if you're on your best behavior, you're stuck in there for a very, very long time. And so in Mississippi, we worked out a plan that puts public safety first. It allows for nonviolent offenders to qualify for a little bit of an early release based on their good behavior. And it's really going to be designed to put more people before the parole board to let the governor's handpicked appointees determine whether or not they're safe to release back into the community. And if they are, that's a way to depopulate in Mississippi. It makes people safer. It cuts huge amounts out of corrections spending. And the biggest part is it will likely prevent the Biden administration from coming in and taking over Mississippi's prisons. It was a big win.
So I know one of the issues that I care about greatly is on the incarceration of women. As we know, there have been instances where the conditions for pregnant women, for example, it's been awful in some of these prisons. Walk us through the work that you all have been doing on improving conditions for incarcerated women.
This is one of the things that we are most proud of here at ACUF. We have an agenda, and it's called the Dignity Agenda, and really it's broken down into three areas. The first is, if you were pregnant in prison, well, one, there's a question is how you got pregnant in prison, and we want to make sure that we're tracking all that data to ensure that women aren't being abused while they're incarcerated. But if you are in prison and pregnant, oftentimes these women find themselves shackled. And I'm a father of two, and I've seen how women who are late in their pregnancies, they don't have great balance, and when you're shackled and you fall down, guess what? It hurts the mother and it hurts the child. So one part of our dignity agenda is to ban the use of shackles on pregnant women. The second part goes to feminine hygiene in prisons. Prisons are designed by men. They're largely operated by men. And what you find is that women have a hard time getting feminine hygiene products. And yet, when they do need them and they can't afford them, then they're penalized for having a messed up uniform, or they're penalized for trying to find ways to cope with menstruation. So our work on that is to make sure that women below the poverty line do have a source of feminine hygiene products. And then the third part is dealing with families, and that is women are primary caregivers for so many children. And we want to make sure that those children have the ability to visit their parents, their mothers. So if they're going to incarcerate a woman, they need to be within 250 miles of the children so that they can come visit and take off some of the restrictions on the number of kids that can come in to see them.
Well, we want to give a real shout out. I know the governor of Oklahoma, Governor Tate Reeves of Mississippi, Governor Lee of Tennessee have all been really picking up this ball and making great progress, playing off the progress of the Trump administration, where you obviously served. David Dia, as we close this conversation, any hope that Joe Biden will get religion on criminal justice reform and actually work in a bipartisan way with Republicans?
Well, this is the guy that was the author of the 1994 crime bill that put more African Americans in prison for longer periods of time, and not only did that, but encouraged states to do the same thing. And he's made a whole lot of great promises. We haven't seen anything at all, and it's really disappointing. But on the other hand, I'm a little nervous that Biden will go so far overboard to kind of overcorrect that he throws public safety out the window too.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, David. You've been such a strong leader in this area of criminal justice reform. I know you worked closely with President Trump and their team, as well as in Democrats. It's one of those bipartisan issues. It's something that I think for everyday Americans, like we can easily forget these individuals, these nonviolent offenders who have been sentenced for way too long, and really trying to find common sense solutions where the communities as well as law enforcement can agree that changes need to be made. So we want to thank you so much for joining us on CPAC Now.
We are honored to be joined by one of our great ACU board members, Veronica Birkenstock from Dallas, Texas. Veronica, thanks for being with us on CPAC Now.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Always fun to be with ACU.
There's a lot going on in Texas, including some event that's going to be going on.
There's a big event. And let me tell you, Veronica's been working hard, so hard to get this organized. We've got CPAC in Texas, which means this is a national conference. Veronica, give us some details.
Oh, finally, a dream come true. We're going to be hosting our very first regional CPAC in Dallas, starting in July 8th through the 11th. And we're just extremely excited about this event. Finally, conservatives will have a massive platform and stage in Dallas to be able to talk about how we take back our country.
And we've never had a CPAC in the state of Texas. We've never been to Dallas. We had this great CPAC in Orlando, Florida, to kind of reopen up America. And while we had CPAC in Florida, Mississippi opened up, the state of Texas opened up, you had Alabama opening up. So people kind of got religion on this idea that lockdowns don't work. But Texas, we give Governor DeSantis a lot of credit, but Texas is doing a great job too. CPAC is going to be big. We are not limited on how many tickets we can sell. We're going to jam people into this hotel. And Veronica, you're on the ground there. What do you think the response is going to be?
I think we're going to have an amazing response. And Texas has been waiting for this. We're open. We're ready for business. The hotel in Dallas has opened up pretty much everything we want to do and we'd like to do to be able to invite as many Texans as we can. But we're not just necessarily looking for Texans. We're looking for all freedom and conservatives to come and spend a few days with us and learn from the experts and how we can work together to take back the House and the Senate and hopefully the White House in 2024.
And then also talk about, issues that are impacting not only nationally, but we see with the border crisis happening in Texas. Veronica, walk us through, what do you see there when it comes to how the governor's handling it, how your really Republican leadership have handled the issue on the border?
Well, it's certainly a challenge. I know Governor Abbott earlier this week said Texas is going to take care of the problem and the federal government's going to pay for it. And that's exactly what we're going to have to do. What we're having to see is the states are having to actually step up and take care of their own borders. And Texas obviously has a huge landmass on the border, and we're seeing thousands and thousands of people come in each day. And actually Dallas has been inundated with some of the what they call the youth that have come in. We've had a little over 3,000 young men who have been relocated even to our Dallas Convention Center. And it's a real problem. It's very costly, and we are vetting these people. We don't have any idea who they are. We've been very blessed in Texas to have very low numbers of COVID related incidents lately, but this puts everyone at risk. Not only is our health at risk, but our safety and security is at risk. And
Veronica, let me jump in here for a little bit. There was also a school board race that just happened. This is actually really good news. It's a Dallas area critical race theory opponents. These two members, Hannah Smith and Cam Bryan, they won 70% of the vote in this school board election. What happened there? What do you know?
Well, I think parents woke up. Actually, all politics is local, and certainly in our schools, it's very important to have people who are understand how important education is. And what happened in South Lake, which is just by our Dallas Fort Worth Airport, the parents there got involved and they vetted beautiful candidates who actually stood up against the critical race theory and took back that entire school board. And they had a lot of resistance. And we had Hollywood obviously playing in, but on Saturday, it was a remarkable win. And I think it actually put Texas on the map as far as when parents get involved, when conservatives get involved, when we really truly care about what our kids are being taught, and we get out and we vote with our feet and our actions, then things can change.
I agree with you, Veronica. Thanks for all the great service you give to the ACU. You're going to play a special role in helping us bring together this great CPAC event that we're going to have in Dallas, Texas. If you have questions, get on our website at conservative.org. Call us. Veronica's here. I'm here. Mercy's here. The whole team's here. We're going to be coming at you with more information on announcements of speakers and the rest. And if you want to hear anything about our updates on pushing back on this corporate wokeism, remember, go to our website. Look at this letter that the NCAA sent to the American Conservative Union community. Read that, and you'll be seeing our response. Thanks for joining us on CPAC Now. Remember to follow us on Twitter. Sign up for CPAC. Take care.
Good night.